Hi, I'm Andrew Sears, and in this lecture, I'm going to talk about how theological vision informs strategy and creates movement. So, the idea of theological vision, I'm borrowing a term from Tim Keller, and he wrote a book called Center Church. And he talks about the difference between core theology, what we believe, and that's the doctrinal foundation. And these are timeless truths from the Bible about God, our relationship to Him, His purposes in the world. That's the theological tradition, um, organizational statement of faith, and systematic and biblical theology. So these are things that for your organization are not going to change. And then you apply practical theology to develop a theological vision. And what that is that's a faithful reinstatement of the gospel with rich implications for life, ministry, and mission in a particular culture at a moment in history. And it's a mission, vision, value statement. But it goes beyond that. It talks about your ministry DNA, what makes you unique, your philosophy of ministry, your theory of change, but especially, and I think this is probably the most important terms to focus on, your priorities and emphasis. You can't have 10 number one priorities. You can't have 10 things that are emphasized as number one, right? So each organization is going to have different emphases. So, and this is kind of the how to see, and this is what to do. So how the gospel is expressed in a particular ministry in one community at a point in time through programs, culture, staff, systems, policies, and funding models. Now, what Tim Keller did is he moved into Manhattan, and his denomination is a theologically conservative reform denomination. And it's pretty challenging to move into a highly cosmopolitan area like Manhattan and to be successful. So what he had to do is develop a unique theological vision for his community, but then also organize a church around that. And he planted a church which grew tremendously and has become a model nationally. So he, in Center Church, he talked about how he did that, particularly in serving the upper middle class urban population there. Now, how I want to use this is, and why we designed this course is we want to help align what's called enacted values with espoused values. So enacted values are what you do, and espoused values are what you say you're going to do, right? So this is, and throughout our lives, Paul talks about how he, did the things he didn't want to do, and did the things he couldn't do the things he wanted to do. This is a struggle for every Christian, and it's a struggle for every Christian organization. So how do you better align these? Well, the idea behind this course is one of the key things is you need to have expertise in practical theology. So what happens is these get misaligned because people don't have expertise in practical theology, and not just general practical theology, because often that has to do with pastors. Practical theology that actually relates to the type of ministry you're doing, and then that also is going to help improve the connection between your ministry expression and your theological vision. So what we do here at City Vision is we're trying to support that through a lot of different, mechanisms. So we have a lot of our courses are focused on organizational skills or counseling skills. They're very nuts and bolts focused. And the reason why we developed this course is we wanted to make sure that, we're not only making you effective, but you're effective heading in the right direction. You're able to kind of realign. So a lot of our practical theology courses are in that space. And then we have core Bible and theology courses. So let's talk about what a good organizational theological vision, what does it do? So it needs to be rooted in solid biblical foundation, core theology of your tradition or history. It identifies your unique call in addressing the problems you're working to solve. It inspires your community. So it has to be written in an inspirational way. It aligns with their hearts, their minds, and spirit. It defines your mission, vision, and values of the ministry. It's repeated in common themes in training and teaching. It sets boundaries and distinctives for what the ministry will and will not do. So policies, procedures. So this is how you, link up other components to your theological vision. It's not going to define all these things, but it's the guiding light that is going to, help you determine what the policies, procedures, and programs are going to be. It fits with those you serve in your context, bringing growth in life. That's one of the main reasons why you can't have one theological vision for everywhere in the world. Describes a theory of change and how people change and what causes their problems really is what that's about. It connects with the larger movement of what God's doing in similar contexts. It adapts to changes in your community and what God's doing. It protects against secularization and misdrift. And it can be operationalized by tying specific values to strategies, policies, and procedures. So let me just show in a diagram what that looks like. So, in discerning theological vision, given the current or new context and our unique calling, what is the theological vision that will maximize our impact while remaining faithful to our core theology and values? And the idea is it's basically the heart. It's guiding everything that you're doing. But then you have strategy, and you need to get all these components to work together. Because if you have a great vision, but you don't have a good strategy, or you don't have good execution of that strategy, then you're not going to be successful. So part of what made Tim Keller unique was not only did he articulate a theological vision that fit his context in Manhattan, but he was able to organizationally develop a church that was able to scale, pay, good people, and, raise up leaders. So what you're trying to do is adapt to a changing context and audience so that you're able to maximize growth. So the goals of this course is to develop develop the personal and organizational core competencies and discerning theological vision. So that's really the focus of weeks 1 through 6. And then in week 7, we're going to have you bring that together into a well-defined theological vision. And then with that, create a plan to ensure all aspects of the organization align with that theological vision. That's what we're going to do in week 8. So let me just add a little bit more context. So as we're trying to develop a theological vision, we have to think about, what's our place in history. And I'm using this for, potentially students in the United States, but you could adapt this to whatever country you're at. So you have Western society, and then you have, what state is Western Christianity in right now? What state is American Christianity in? What state is your denominational movement in? And then what's your specific ministry context? So, what Tim Keller did is, he considered kind of all these factors, and part of the reason why he needed a different theological vision from the rest of his denomination was he was in a different context. Manhattan was radically different than the average context for his denomination. So he had to adapt that. So what happens is a new movement happens when someone aligns a new theological vision and ministry expression with what God's doing in a particular context in a way that enables it to spread. So Tim Keller, not only he planted this church that transformed thousands of lives in Manhattan, but he articulated it in a way and built now a movement called the City to City movement, where what he realized is there's a lot of these urban centers, and it's largely serving a multiracial upper middle class audience. And he has been, he created this City to City movement before he passed away, and that has been growing. So ultimately that's what we're trying to do. And many of you are part of movements that were established a while ago, and where you're at may or may not fit the current theological vision for that movement. So the question is, how do you adapt? Now, what happens is if you're a part of a movement that has theological vision that is misaligned with your context and audience, so change happens. Say you're in a city that's become highly cosmopolitan, or is become very diverse, and your clients are very different, or your clients are dealing with different problems than what your movement was initially founded to solve, then there's a misalignment. So, these are the stages of growth of an organization. So you have startup, growth, maturity, and then you start to see decline. And it's not just happening because you have you're not able to execute your strategy well. It's because your theological vision is off. So what you're really talking about here is, Jesus said that I put new wine in new wineskins. I think what he was really getting at there is if you're creating a new um, movement, you have to have kind of a new system and new structures and new people for that. So you have this misalignment. You need a new wineskin. You need recontextualization. You need a new theological vision, and that's very difficult and dangerous. Now, probably the most popular book currently out that was written about this idea is "Canoeing the Mountains" by Todd Bolsinger. And the idea behind that book was Lewis and Clark. Their original plan was to find a path, a river that could take people to the west coast, and there'd be a river passage. So whenever they were exploring, they were carrying canoes, and they were expecting eventually to find a river, but instead all they found was the mountains because they really didn't know what was going to be out there. So there was no Western Passage river. So what do you do whenever your plan was to go canoe, but there's mountains? Ultimately, you have to recontextualize. But honestly, this is one of the most difficult things you could ever do. And I would say my experience, 9 out of 10 ministries who try to do this, they don't do it very well. And what's really needed, and the reason why they don't do it well, is you get people who are either stuck in tradition, or you get people who are stuck in innovation. But what you need is dual expertise. You need to understand the how and why of your movement. So if you're changing things, you're not going to break the whole system, because the idea behind a movement is it works because all the pieces of the system work together. And that includes the theological vision. So if you take, one part out of a car saying, you know what, my car doesn't need an alternator, well, your car's not going to run. So you have to understand how the whole system works together. And at the same time, you have to be able to apply innovation and emerging trends and models. So that's really what this course is about. So hopefully this will be helpful to you. If you have any questions, please ask your faculty member.